When Paul wrote those words, he was dealing with a problem that had arisen in the world at the time. There was a great famine that was taking place in the Palestine area. And the Christians and many others were suffering violently. And so Paul was saying, we need to help them. We need to find a way to be involved in their lives. And he wrote these words about him collecting this money and taking it down so that they could be helped and they could distribute it to those who are in need. But there's something going on behind the scenes that maybe we don't notice in that passage and in that context. And maybe we don't even notice it in the observance of what we just did. Because in this observance of giving, I wonder if we really recognize the power of giving. One of the worst diseases that can afflict the church is cirrhosis of the giver. It first reared its head in Acts chapter 5. We find there a situation where there were two people who said, I want to be involved in that. Hey, that looks really good. You're giving money to people in need. And privately they were saying, wow, if people can see us giving, we get all this credit. How can we give and still hold on to it? They sold a piece of land and agreed, we're going to give from this money. And when asked, the husband said, yeah, Ananias said, that's exactly what happened. We sold it for this much and we gave you this much. And Peter said, no, you didn't. You're lying. You had control of it. You could sell it, the land, and give all the money, or you could take part of the money and give. It's in your control. You're lying to say that you gave it all to look good. He lost his life. When his wife came in, Sapphira, she said the exact same thing, and you know that she too lost her life. When Paul was writing to these people, these Christians, about the great need that was there, one of the things that he was trying to do was to teach them the power of giving. Today I want you to think with me about the power of giving. Go to the text that was just read. And I want you to notice a couple of things that happen there. First of all, quickly, these three facts about giving that seem to be very obvious to me. The passage that was read in 2 Corinthians. Look at verses 6 and 7. He says, first of all, you need to understand, in order to know the power of giving, it first has to come from your heart. It begins there. That's where the power of giving resides. If it doesn't start inside, if it isn't something that really involves you at your very foundation of life, then you're really not going to experience the power that comes through giving. Number two, starting in verse 8 through verse 10. Here's what he says. You need to understand this too. Giving, when done properly, is a way to open up the pathway for the grace of God to come into your life. If you're not a giving person in the way the Bible teaches it, then God has no pathway by which to give back to you. That is grace. Therefore, we need to understand the power of giving so that God will be gracious to us. And number three, he says in this text, furthermore, people who don't know God, people who don't understand God, you know what? Those people who don't know God may come to know Him by the power of giving that Christians show. You see what happened in these verses? When they sent that money down there to help those Christians, not only did they thank God because of it, but everybody who received were also blessed by that same giving. I believe the giving in this case turned out to be an evangelistic outreach. Not only were those Christians involved and were they helped, but they were also involved in letting others be helped too, so that by that giving of money, they were learning who God was through the lives of those Christian people. The power of giving. So what is it? What is the power of giving? Wednesday night we had what I consider to be a really enjoyable time as we had various groups work together to come up with some ideas about family and various things. And one of the things that I asked them to do was to answer the question, giving is powerful because. And all of the answers were tremendous. And they all led to the same conclusion that I want to present to you, and that is this. Here is the power of giving. The power of giving is this. By giving, you get far more than you do by receiving. That's how it is. That's the power of giving. The power of giving is that by giving, you actually receive more than if you were the one doing the receiving. That's the power of giving. We also learned Wednesday night what that verse is. Those of you who were here, remember that. Acts 20 and verse 35. It is more blessed to give than to receive. What's he saying? You get more from giving than you do from receiving. Or like in the Old Testament, in Ecclesiastes chapter 11 and in verse 1, the writer said, cast your bread upon the waters, and after many days you will find it. It comes back to you. Listen to the words of the Proverbs writer in Proverbs chapter 11. There is one who scatters yet increases more. There is one who withholds more than is right, and it leads to poverty. The generous soul will be made rich, but he who waters will also be watered himself. The people will curse him who withholds grain, but blessing will be on the head of him who sells it. The writer continued in Proverbs 28 and in verse 27, making these words, he who gives to the poor will not lack, but he who hides his eyes will have many curses. The power of giving is in the fact that we receive more from giving than from receiving. I think Paul wanted those Christians to understand that. When you are a giving person, when you give to help those people who are in need, you receive so much. That's the power of giving. And when we offer an opportunity here for people to give, we're giving them an opportunity, all of us, to experience the power of giving. The giving is not about just because we want to get money. That's not what it's about. Furthermore, the proper attitude connected to giving is not that I am giving it to this church. That's not the right attitude either. The proper understanding is this. I'm giving to the Lord. I'm giving to the Lord. You see, that's the power of giving. Because by giving it to the Lord, that pathway is now open. And His grace flows to giving people. It is not possible to receive from receiving what you receive from giving. Can't duplicate it. Not possible. You know the feeling. When you give out of the heart, when you give in such a way that you receive so much, then try and see. When you were given to, when somebody gave you something and you received it, did it feel exactly the same? It just doesn't. Number two, it multiplies. That kind of giving multiplies. Because see, in giving, the person receives, that's a blessing. But the giver receives, that's a blessing. And others who see the giving being done receive. There are more blessings. That one act of giving multiplies upon itself. You cannot replace that. You cannot find that somewhere else. You cannot duplicate that in any other way. You see, the power of giving resides in the idea that I will indeed learn and gain more from the giving than from the receiving. But now third, how does this work? Why is giving so powerful? Well, let's think about for a minute cirrhosis of the liver. I thought about maybe a picture of a liver filled with cirrhosis. And I thought, that's a downer. And somebody actually may want to go to lunch and planning to have liver and onions. And that just wouldn't be good. But it's not a pretty sight. The cirrhosis of the liver is a condition that hardens and changes the liver so that it cannot do its job of filtering the blood supply. And what happens? The body is poisoned. When the liver has a job to do and does it well, then we remain pure and clean in the blood supply. But when that cirrhosis sets up, the filtering can't happen, and the poisons build up. In the Christian life, it's the same thing. When cirrhosis of the giver sets up, filtering does not happen. And when that filtering does not happen, poisons build up in the spiritual body. The power of giving is not only that you receive from giving more than you receive from receiving, but number two, the power of giving is that it prevents the buildup of poisons that rob the spiritual life. Notice, one of the poisons that we have to deal with is the poison of jealousy. Now, admittedly, the word jealousy is not always a bad word. God is described of himself in the book of Exodus. I am a jealous God. But he has a right to be. And we had studied that word in Bible class this morning, and it is right for a married couple when one is looking at someone outside that marriage, it is right for that other one to be jealous. No, you belong to me. And that's what God is saying. I'm a jealous God. You belong to me. And when we start looking elsewhere to be fulfilled and to be involved in things that oppose God, God is jealous. And he says, no, you belong to me. But jealousy that is wrong is jealousy that results from I want to take care of me and me only, and I'm not concerned about anybody else. Therefore, we become envious or jealous of what others have or what they do or what they've achieved. Because I didn't get to. The wise man said in Proverbs 14 and verse 30 that envy is rottenness to the bones. What does he mean by the bones? You know, if you don't have strong bones, what happens? You can't stand. You can't move. Your skeletal structure is what gives you your strength to move on. But when envy gets to be a part of your life, spiritually speaking, your skeleton begins to evaporate. And you don't have strength that you need. You don't have what you need. But if you have cirrhosis of the giver, jealousy will build up in your life and break you down. But the power of giving is that giving filters out that poison. Listen to the words of Paul in Romans 12 and verse 8. He said it this way, speaking about your talents, your abilities. If you have an ability to give, do it with simplicity. One version says liberality. Well, liberality, we think it means, okay, give a whole bunch. Well, that's not the word. When Jesus sat there at the temple and he'd watched all those leaders take bags of money and drop it into the treasury, and he saw this widow lady take 2 half pennies and put them in. It wasn't about give a whole bunch. The actual word is simplicity. You know what simplicity means? Nothing attached. It's simple. You want to experience the power of giving? Then through proper giving, it filters out the potential to have the poison of jealousy build up in your life. Because you give simply. Nothing attached. It's not simplicity when you say, I will give, but here's what I expect. No. Don't let envy and jealousy build up in your life. Give with simplicity. Number 2, there's the poison of materialism. The poison of materialism. Do not love the world or the things in the world. For anyone who loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. All that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life, these are not of the Father, but are of the world. And the world is passing away, and all of its lusts. 1 John 2, 15 to 17. Materialism means to be tied to material things. To find your meaning in material things. To find your reason for living in material things. To find your satisfaction and contentment in material things. I wonder how many people you know, or how many people, maybe you, began to be anxious when the new iPhone 6 came out. Whoa, gotta get it. And now, things in my past that come to mind at certain times. I remember Brother Chad Middleton, years ago as an elder of this church. I believe it may have been Ron came in and had a presentation on moving into the computer age. And he made this marvelous presentation. And there's nobody that doubted that we need to do it. But you know what Mr. Chad said? He sat back in his chair and he goes, brethren, we got a tiger by the tail that will never be able to let go. You know what he meant? Once you start down that path, you're going to go right on down the path. He's right. He's right. But we needed to do it. Now the phone companies have us. They've even created a new situation. You know what? Go ahead. And every 2 years we'll give you a brand new phone. The next one that comes up, you've been longing for it, you can have it, no problem. And we're thinking, wow, a free phone. No, not really. In fact, you start paying for it today, and you get it in 24 months. We don't even treat cars that way. You're going to pay for it. And therefore, they're making it easy for us to be more materialistic. I'm not saying it's wrong to have a new phone. I'm saying don't get tied to material things. Proper giving helps filter out materialism. Jesus talked about it in Matthew chapter 5. He said, you've heard it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, but I say to you, don't resist an evil person. If he slaps you on your right cheek, turn to him the other also. If he asks for your tunic, give him your coat. If he compels you to walk with him a mile, go 2. Give to him who wants to borrow from you and do not turn away. Jesus was saying, look, don't you be tied to material things. You need to be able to share, and in sharing, you filter out the potential poison of materialism. A third poison is pride. The Proverbs writer said, pride goes before destruction and haughtiness before a fall. Proverbs 16:18. Pride in giving is this. Hey, look at me. I'm giving. Hey, watch this. Look how great I am. Wonder how many people have broken arms from patting themselves on the back. How many people get their shoulders thrown out of joint because they're reaching so far back to pat themselves? That's what pride is. And that can happen in giving. Proper giving is what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 6. When you give your charitable deed, verses 3 and 4. Don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Give your charitable deed in secret. And your Father who sees in secret himself will reward you. I have vague memories of an old-time practice in country churches where to give, people filed by a table that had a cover on it. And you slipped your giving under the cover. So your left hand did not know what your right hand was doing. I don't think Jesus was meaning we have to do it that way. But I know this. We can be prideful about our giving and prideful in our giving. And that pride in giving can build up as a poison that affects the rest of our lives. Proper giving filters away that poison. And the final one is greed. Greed. It was Paul who wrote to Timothy in 1 Timothy 6, verse 10. The love of money is the root of all forms of evil. Not money, the love of it. I understand the fact that we have to live in a society that's based on money, and you cannot live without money. I know that. But the problem we have is to balance the fact of the need of money and the tendency to love that money and to be greedy because of it. How many times have you seen it demonstrated? Parent teaching a child to give when the plate is passed and shaking the hand to be sure the money drops out. I gave it to you to give, not to stick in your pocket. So give it. It's funny, but it teaches a lesson. In this text, what did Paul say? Be a cheerful giver. Not grudgingly or necessity. God loves a cheerful giver. When we give properly, the power of giving filters the poison of greediness out of our lives. If anyone has a tendency to the poisons of jealousy or materialism or pride or greed, the very things that are antithetical to giving, the cure is actually to give. And in so doing, not only will you receive more than you would by receiving, but you will filter out those poisons that are causing you problems, not just in giving, but in relationships and in all of your life. Because once that poison sets up, it is very hard to get rid of it. Therefore, give freely. That's what Jesus said in Luke 6 and verse 38. Give and it'll be given to you. Shaken down, pressed together and overflowing, it'll flow into your life. God knows that if we are giving people, we become powerful people. That's the power of giving. And Jesus showed us intimately how powerful it is. When He gave Himself, when He gave up everything for you and for me, the power of that has influenced millions of people through the years. There's power in giving. And by the life that Jesus gave, many millions of people have been changed. If we are giving people, we not only change our lives, but we change others too. That giving example, if you've not given back to Him your life, today would be a great day to start. You can be immersed into His life where He has given so much, and then you can learn the benefits of giving. Or today, if you need to come to the Lord in any way, we're here to help you while we stand and sing together.